It's good to take constructive criticism, and it is good to take feedback, but ultimately you gotta be prepared to walk the path alone.
It's just something that I live. It's just something that I live. Hey, hey, hey. It's just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it real. J.E. Get 'em. It's just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I feel.
Oh, man, we got some awesome guests on the show today. These gentlemen need no introduction. The great EYL, man. Let me tell y'all gentlemen something. We're pure admirers. As you know, Bob, Black-owned business. To see what y'all doing, man, around financial literacy in the community, man, it's the guiding energy for our brand, man. So to have y'all on the podcast, man, I don't even know if I could do the podcast. I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. You know what I mean? It's not often you get to, interact with somebody you see them in the industry doing things, and you like, man, I want everybody to move like this. So I'm just y'all be patient with me while we do this.
We're having a moment.
So, a couple questions, man. First of all, man, how y'all do all these different interviews?
How do we do the different interviews?
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. Like when I sit down with people, I always tell them that they're kind of at a disadvantage, right? Because like I know what he's gonna say. We talk to each other for 25 years,
yeah,
and so we just kind of flow off each other. And then if it's somebody that we're not really familiar with, and this is the best part, is like we get to educate ourselves in the industry beforehand, and then learn from the person as the interview is going on. So we do research. A lot of times people will send us some of the background in their industry, and so we learn from that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's endurance. We get to talk for a living, man. I can't complain about that.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. So for us, our brand is about community, finance, education, and ownership. And so y'all are a representation of what that looks like, the reality of that. Like we're pushing that mentality in the work in the industry, but to see the representation of it and see what happens when you obey those four principles, it's just beautiful. So when we talk about ownership, you guys own your brand, right? So a lot of people think you're your own boss, you just do what you want to do. Can you elaborate on how discipline goes in being an owner? How y'all manage that discipline?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you gotta have a strategic plan in place, right? You can't wing it. So you gotta know what you're doing. You gotta know what you expect your employees to do. You gotta know what the vision is. Most important thing is you gotta display leadership. You gotta work hard. It's not something that you can just kind of coast. Okay. Especially at the beginning stages. We're still at the beginning stages relatively from where we plan to be 20, 30 years down the line. So having your own company is something that it's not for everybody, because it's like there's no safety net on it. Like, it's not like, all right, if you don't get paid this month, you don't just get paid. Like, it's not like a job where you're guaranteed to get a paycheck every 2 weeks, or you're guaranteed to have health insurance, or you're guaranteed to get money and put into your 401k. These are all things as a business owner you got to provide for yourself. So I love it because I was used to that for a long time, but I just think that that's important to paint that picture, because entrepreneurship is good and it can be, glamorized, but there's other parts to it that people don't see.
Okay.
So they need to understand, like, there's nobody waking you up. You got to wake yourself up.
Yeah.
There's nobody telling you, okay, punch the clock, you leave here at 5 o'clock. You might have to work till 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
You probably don't get weekends off. This is a weekend. We still working on the weekend. So you got to sacrifice your family time.
Yeah.
This is all things that you got to, take into consideration when you're a business owner.
Nah, you said some very powerful things. Like, we like for our audience to hear. This podcast is about highlighting, Black-owned businesses. But what we see are those common principles across all Black-owned business owners who made it, right? Who are at a higher level, right? And one thing you said is that sacrifice mark. People they look at where you are now and they just think, oh, it just happened. Oh yeah, they just became success overnight. Well, no. Those times you didn't take pay. Mm-hmm. Those times where you want to be at home with the fam, but you can't because you got to go over here and do this. I think a lot of times when we talk ownership, I talk about the greatness of ownership and the benefit of it. Also, man, that sacrifice is real.
Yeah.
You know, the payoff is good too, but that sacrifice is definitely real. Let me ask this last question for you guys: if you had to leave a young black man in America who has a vision in his mind, is trying to get the marketplace to adopt that vision, is just resistance because of lack of understanding, what would be some advice you get that young black man?
I'll pick it
So you said, as far as, can you repeat the question again?
So a young black man in the United States of America specifically, because that's where we are, he has a vision in his mind. He's trying to bring that vision to reality, right? But he's facing resistance because he has something new. What advice would you give that young black man with that innovation? Because you guys did something innovative.
I would say,
I'm asking this question.
Well, you got to believe in yourself first and foremost. So never pay attention to what other people might say.
Okay.
Especially like, negativity. It's good to take constructive criticism, and it is good to take feedback, but ultimately you got to be prepared to walk the path alone.
I like that.
So that's the first thing. Like, never follow the crowd.
I like that.
Don't be afraid to be original.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to do things by yourself if you have to. But it's also important to, try to link with other like-minded people if you can.
I like that.
So if you can, link with other like-minded people, if you can have a mentor, if you can, find a friend that's interested in the same thing, 2 minds is better than one.
I like that.
So that's important. But the biggest thing I think is just to actually write down a vision and write down a plan, like to say, okay, this is what I want to do. And after you write it down, it's like, what are the actionable items that you have to take to achieve that plan?
Like
understand, like, nothing happens overnight. So, if the goal is to make $1 million selling T-shirts, okay, cool. How are we going to do that? Like, let's start with 100 T-shirts. Let's start with every Saturday we're going to go to local barbershops. Like, you got to really break it down on the grind.
I like
on
that.
the ground level. So I think that, just thinking big, but being prepared to start small.
I like that.
Is important.
Yeah, I think if he's meeting resistance, I would say keep going. Right? When we think about the greatest businesses in the world, they've all had resistance because they were disruptive.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing something that's disruptive, then you're onto something that's major, right? So you think like Amazon, you think about Airbnb, you think about Uber, Tesla, they're all disrupted the industry. And so if you have a business plan right now in your mind and you're meeting resistance because it's probably something disruptive, and you probably haven't met the right people to help that vision come to life. And so the goal is just to keep going, man.
I like that.
Never stop going. Like you said, have the plan and vision, but surround yourself with people that can help the vision. Like we realized that very early. Like financial literacy was something that wasn't very common in our community, right? It's now a disruptive media, right? So it's like, all right, well, let's see how far we can go with this thing. So I think a lot of people will look at the disruption as something negative, like I'm not doing something right, but it could be the opposite. You might be actually doing the right thing.
Nah, I asked that question, man, just because we like our audience to see, across the board. Don't matter what industry you're in, don't matter what you're doing, those common principles are the same. And I like the way you put it in, have a vision. Yeah, I have a macro. I got to focus on the micro grind for a while. Nah, I like that. Well, man, I appreciate you, gentlemen. Always admire, always going to continue to admire, man, the brand. We love Blackexcellence, B.O.B., Black-owned business, so you already know we for it. So, been another great episode of Led by Our Podcast. We out. Man,
Love, peace.
It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it